Here we go with the basic rules of artifacts. Hi everyone, it's Lisaphile and welcome to this rules video. So you're finally going to be able to find out how artifacts works, how to play artifacts, because as you know, the game isn't available yet, but you can play it, especially on Tabletop Simulator. So don't hesitate, the link is in the description if you have Tabletop Simulator, and with this video, you'll have everything you need to be able to play the basic game of artifacts. Before you start this video, sign up on the artifacts page, because even if you hear about it on YouTube, you might get additional info in the newsletters, and who knows, maybe a pre-order soon. To put it simply, Artifacts is a game of management and confrontation in which you first create your machine, then take it to an arena to collect as many influence points as possible, either by shooting your opponents or by collecting objectives. All this is managed with an influence track, which are victory points. How do you earn influence points? Well, either by shooting your opponents, in which case it's the amount of damage you do to them that earns you victory points, or if you collect these little tokens placed on the board, which are prestige bonuses, you'll have to either step on them or shoot them, and each objective is worth 5 victory points. Now that we've seen the aim of the game, let's talk a little about the setup. There's going to be a main board which will be the game arena, on which you'll have your artifacts placed on either side of the arena in the center, and you're going to place walls on the arena, which will have this precise layout. Here's the diagram, and place the round marker on 4. This is the number of rounds the players will make during the confrontation phase. In this video on the confrontation phase, each player will only need the bottom board. 2 cubes will be placed here on the 50 and another on the 0 to define your machine's life points. Each player also places a cube to indicate their victory point. Now that we've got all that out of the way, I'll introduce these elements so you can understand what's coming next. The board is divided into different sections. First of all, there are the life points at the bottom right, defined by the cubes placed in different places. You can therefore have a maximum of 99 life points, or none at all, of course. The second part is architectonics. You have a figurine representing your artifact. This figurine is placed exactly in the same direction as the architectonic board. Right now it's facing the other way, but when it's turned to the left, all the architectonics will move in the same direction. One thing you have to understand about this game is that the orientation of your machine on the board can change what's on your architectonics. As Percival would say, depending on how you're turned, it changes everything. In this architectonics, you'll be able to place various objects. Firstly, you'll be able to place an elemental geode in the center to define the heart of your machine. I say you can, but in fact you must. If you don't have a heart in your machine, it's no good. This heart will define the element of your machine and therefore potentially its resistance to other elements that players will have. The second thing you can put in your machine are cannons. These cannons can be placed at various points on the machine, either in front or to the right of the side or to the right of the rear, etc. All angles are possible. Any angle is possible. When you place a cannon, you can leave it empty in this way, but you can also add an elemental geode which can be placed at the end of the cannon. This will have the effect of giving your cannon an element. So you can shoot here, for example, with a water element. Let's imagine that here I'm firing a water geode at someone with a fire heart. Well, like in Pokemon, it'll do more damage, but we'll deal with the damage later. The last thing you'll be able to place in your architectonics is armor. These can be placed on the flanks, diagonals, or corners of your machine. They always come in pairs, so either the front flank or the right front flank or the right flank or the right rear flank and so on. So there are always 2 shields involved in an attack. There are 3 types of armor: light armor, reinforced armor, and mirrored armor. Each type of armor grants 2 armor ratings. Light armor, for example, grants 2 armor. Reinforced and mirrored armor, on the other hand, grant 4 armor. Not because they're more powerful, but because reinforced or mirrored armor contains light armor. So there are 2 types of armor in this armor. And if, for example, on your front side you have reinforced armor and mirrored armor, then you have 3 types of armor, which in theory would give you 6. But for the side where you have maximum armor, the game gives you a bonus of +8, not +6. Because you have mirrored armor, reinforced armor, and below both, you have light armor. Then, if you have several times the same type of armor on one of your flanks, you'll be able to earn bonuses that I'll explain in detail. But for example, if you have 2 light armors, if you're attacked there, you'll get a bonus. If you have 2 reinforced armors here, you'll get another bonus. And if you have 2 shimmering armors here, you'll get another bonus. I'll explain all this in this shooting phase. In this architectonics, there's one last very important thing, and that's that you'll be able to place dice. You'll be able to place a dice every time there's a fusion geode in your architectonics, whether on the core or at the end of the cannons. You can also place a geode upside down so that it's hidden from view, but also allows you to simply place a dice and not necessarily take advantage of the element. This is particularly useful when you don't have a cannon and just want to be able to place a dice. They're called energy cubes because they can send energy all over the machine. First of all, let's see what the energy cube does on a heart. A dice, I don't know if I'm teaching you, but its opposite sides are always equal to 7. That's going to be very important in this game because, for example, if I put my dice like this with the 1 on top, the 6 is underneath. Well, if I tell you that this number on top and this number underneath are used for something, it's already triggering something in the brain. The chosen number above will be the magnetosphere, i.e. your machine's helmet. It's gonna add a bit of defense to your machine. The bottom number, what I like to call the feet, will be your machine's ability to move. So here it has 1 of armor and 6 of movement capacity. But we go even further because opposite the dice is the number 4. Well, this number 4 will send energy to the cannon in front of it. And so, as you can imagine, if I have a cannon aiming downwards, well, the number here on the dice will also send out energy. So dice placement is very important. And the other dice, those placed on the other elemental geodes, well, they'll also send out energy. For example, this dice, which is all alone, will send energy to this cannon. And this dice here, since it's accompanied by a cannon, will have several capacities. First of all, the number in front will send energy. So it's going to add to the attack. So you see, it's going to pick up the energy from the heart, the energy from that cube on the right, and the energy it's sending itself. That's 4 plus 6 plus 6. That's 16. The top number is also important as it's the range of your cannon. You can also place an empty cannon with no geode on it and therefore no energy die. In this case, the cannon will have only 1 range. But the other die phases count, i.e. the energy die will be able to send energy to the sides here and here. The heart, on the other hand, receives no energy. Here's a diagram of how the dice can send energy to each other. It's pretty clear. Now that we've seen the energy dice, we can move on to the resistors. The resistors are located here on the side of the architectonics. When you have an activated resistance, for example here, water, well, your machine won't take bonus damage because of the water. Here's a diagram of the extra damage that elements can take. And so, water attacking fire was more like 6. The next element of the player board is the kinematic section. This indicates the movement capabilities of your machine. If, for example, I have a translation pointer placed here, then my machine will be able to move forward by 1. And now you're going to say to me, why 1 forward? Well, you told us earlier that there was a capacity of 6 with the die. Yes, but only if your translation needle is mixed with a celerity coefficient. In that case, this forward displacement will have the capacity of the number on the bottom of the die, which is placed on your heart, what I called the feet earlier. In this case, my artifact can move from 1 to 6 squares forward. If I had put it on the bottom right, she would have had 1 of capacity on the bottom right, and if I added the celerity coefficient, it would have the 6 capacity on the bottom right. Here, for example, I've got 1 ability to move backwards and 1 to move forwards, and I can add another, for example, to the left. I've told you that I can add celerity coefficients to add displacement value, but I can also add a celerity coefficient in an empty spot where there's no translation needle. In this case, the celerity coefficient will add a bonus to the 2 needles directly to the left and right of it. For example, I can normally move 1 square backwards here. Thanks to this celerity coefficient, it gains +1, so I can move 2 squares backwards, or forwards, I can move forward 2 squares. This one, however, is not affected. Another thing to know is that if I place a celerity coefficient, I'll be able to move 6 squares. If I place a second one, because yes, it's possible, I'll have double the movement capacity of the die placed on my heart. Here, for example, instead of having a movement capacity of 6, I'll have a movement capacity of 12. So from 1 to 12. The last thing I can place in the kinematics are celerity coefficients in the section above, which is the rotation capacity of our machine. If I place one on the right, for example, I could turn 90 degrees to the right, and if I place, say, 2 on the left, I could turn 180 degrees to the left. And so, you see, if I put a third one here, I'll have full rotation capability. We've finished with your machine's motion capabilities, the kinematics. Now it's time for me to introduce you to the most important resource of the confrontation phase. These are energy cubes. These energy cubes have several functions. Firstly, they can be placed here. In a way, they're your action points. Every time you want to do an action, hop, I move a cube and it allows me to do an action. I do another action, I do another action, I do another action, I do another action. Then my turn is over and it's the next player's turn. You'll have a maximum of 5 actions in a turn. More importantly, each time you take an action, you'll have to spend energy cubes. If, for example, I want to move, I'll spend an action point to say I'm moving, but then I'll take an energy cube and place it in the direction I want to move. For example, if I want to move to the left, I'll place it here and then I move my artifact. If I want to move back to the left, I spend an action and place another cube on this translation needle to move back to the left. If I want to turn, I spend an action and place an energy cube on the turning ability I have and want to do. If now I want to shoot, and yes I do, because at some point you have to shoot, I'm going to have to spend an action quite simply as usual, and I'll place a cube on the gun I'm going to shoot with. I check the distance, etc. Then there's the whole attack phase, which I'll explain more about in the confrontation part. Now, if I want to shoot back with this cannon, I can't do it. Why can't I? Because a cannon that has fired is overheating. This energy cube will prevent me from firing the cannon again, but I could, for example, fire this one. And so, as you can imagine, the more actions I perform, the more cubes I'll place here, there, and so on. But here, I've given you the maximum number of cubes, or at least a lot of cubes at once. Except that depending on the artifact you have, you won't necessarily have the same number of energy cubes. But when do I get my energy cubes back? Well, in different ways. There are 3 possible actions, always by doing I spend an action point, which are placed here, to the right of the action point location. The first action is energy regeneration. If you decide to take this action, you'll be able to recover all the cubes placed on your movement, cannon or rotation slots and return them to your reserve. But, and here's the problem, if you do this action, there's a pause here, which means your turn is over. Let's say you need to do this action, but you've done 2 actions. Well, that's too bad, because your third action will be the last one of the round. The second possible action is called remodel energy. If you decide to take this action, spending an action point as usual, you'll be able to move your dice in any way you like to send energy into the machine as you wish. Here, for example, I've set my helmet to 6 and my feet to 1. And all this, everywhere in the machine, every time there are fusion geodes, you can place a die on them. The last action available, which is this one, is called energy regulation. This action is not to be taken lightly, as it will allow you to have either more energy cubes or fewer or more actions or fewer actions. Let me explain. You can at any time spend an action to be able to do that particular energy regulation action and remove or add cubes from your action pot and put them in your reserve pot instead. Let's imagine you've got lots of cubes in different places on the board. You've run out of cubes in your reserve. You need energy. You spend an action point and remove a cubie just so you can take an extra action. The action might be, for example, I'm spending this action so I can turn around. And so if you've been following along, I can also do this action to take cubes from my reserve in order to put them back into the available action points. Before you start the game, you'll need to choose your artifact. In your first few games, you'll have 2 choices. Either take a pre-built artifact, of which there are several in the box, or make your own artifact using your instincts. To build your own artifact, you'll have a certain number of points not to exceed, and the items you place in it will cost a certain number of points. For your first few games, limit yourself to 60 points. And here's the table summarizing the cost of each part of the artifact. Light armor, 1. Cannon, 1. Reinforced armor, 2. Celerity coefficient, 2. Resistances, geodes. But above all, don't neglect the 2 items on the right, energy cubes and energy dice. Because if you don't have energy dice, you won't be able to circulate energy between the cannons, and if you don't have energy cubes, you'll have less possible action. So, gauge the various parts in your artifact while not exceeding the maximum value of 60. On arrival in the arena, each artifact arrives on each side of the arena. In the center, they'll have 4 rounds to compete in this arena. And so, let's get down to business. Well, not quite, because there are several ways to earn victory points. You can either shoot your opponents, in which case the hit points you inflict on them will be your victory points. Or, you can pick up objectives that are randomly placed on the board, which if you step on them will earn you 5 victory points, or if you shoot them will also earn you 5 victory points. So let's say the red player steps on the first objective, he gets 5 victory points. Then he shoots at the other target, which also earns him 5 victory points. So now he has 10 victory points, and that's the maximum number of victory points he can get back with the bonuses placed on the board. To prevent you from getting 20 victory points too easily if you've got great movement skills, but he can still recover others to remove them from the board and make them reappear at the end of the round. I'll explain this later, because these tokens don't return directly when the player has taken them. In the first round, you're not allowed to shoot each other. That's just the way it is. So you'll have to do things differently and prepare yourself for the next phases. But you still have the prestige bonuses you can pick up, and so if he's finished his turn, these bonuses will reappear. So he's finished his turn. Next player, the objectives reappear. Here's how you respawn them. Roll 2 dice. First coordinate 3, roll 2 dice again. Second coordinate 12. So I look at my arena board 3, 12, and I place my objective like that. And I do this again for each objective. If an objective is to appear either on an artifact or on a wall, we roll the dice again until a coordinate is possible. But what probably interests you most is that we're going to be able to shoot each other. Let's imagine that the red player can attack the yellow player. If I'm well placed and at a safe distance from my opponent, I'll be able to shoot him. To do this, I spend an action point and shoot in front of myself. So I put a cube on the gun I'm shooting with. The damage phase begins. First, each player rolls a dice. So yes, this is a game where dice are rolled. But dice aren't the most important thing in this game. It just adds a touch of randomness. That's the name of the dice after all. We're going to use these rulers, which are simply a way of calculating more easily. And this ruler has an attack part and a defense part. Each player rolls a dice. The defensive player rolls a 4, the attacking player rolls a 6. So we're going to use this ruler to count our first numbers. 4 for the defensive player, 6 for the attacking player. Then, for the attacker, we'll look at the energy he has recovered with the dice. And yes, that's what the energy transferred by the dice is for. The heart dice sends a 6 to the cannon itself sends a 6 forward, and we have the right hand dice, which also sends a 6 to the cannon. That makes a total of 18, so we add 18 to the freeze, and now you're going to say to me, does that mean that if I'd been able to put a dice in that slot on the left, he could have taken even more damage? Well, no, because the rule limits the amount of energy transferred to 3 dice, which gives us a maximum total of 18. Fortunately, because otherwise it could be very, very hard. The next 2 phases are advanced phases that we'll see in future videos. Next, we'll take a look at elementary damage. For example, here I'm attacking with a water cannon. If my opponent has an air heart, I add more damage. So I increase my rule to more than 2. The last calculation phases are for advanced videos. And the defensive player doesn't just get away with a 4, does he? Well, the defensive player will have his Aliyah dice. He also has his magnetosphere. The magnetosphere was the helmet, the number at the top of the dice, which is placed on the heart. Let's imagine the opponent had foreseen this attack. He'd rolled a 6, so we add 6 to his defense. The next phase is for advanced players. Next, we look to see if the defender had elemental resistance. In this case, no. But if he had one, here for example, he planned a water attack, so he had a water resistance, so he takes away the opponent's elemental bonus. And then we come to the famous armor. Let me recap. 1 type of armor, 2 points. 2 types of armor, 4 points armor. 3 types of armor, 8 points. Light armor has 2 points. Reinforced armor has 4, because it's got the light armor in it. And mirrored armor too. Now every time I'm attacked, there are always 2 armors that are taken into account. Let's say I have 2 light armors. In that case, I have 2 extra points. So I'll add it to my ruler, but on top of that, I get a little bonus. Having 2 light armors allows you to flip your opponent's die. The famous Aliyah die. In the case of our dear attacker, he had a 6. Flipping it over reduces it to a 1. He therefore loses 5 damage points on his attack. Not insignificant, so we reduce it by 5. If, for example, I have 2 reinforced armors, in this case, not only do I have 4 points, but I have 2 types of armor, reinforced armor and light armor, which is contained. I also have the light armor bonus of returning the opponent's die, but I also have the option of doubling my magnetosphere. I had said that my defender had 6 magnetosphere, so the top number on the heart, so he's going to double that, he goes to 12 magnetosphere, and the last case is doubled. This is the double mirroring armor, and in this case, not only do we get the light armor bonus, so you can return the D, and also we'll return damage equal to Alia's die. In this case, we'd return 4 damages. This damage, however, doesn't earn you any victory points. Last configuration, reinforced armor and mirrored armor. We have all 3 types of armor, so we have 8 defense points. We have the bonus of light armor because they contain them, but we don't have any other bonuses. Next, we compare the attacker's result with the defender's result. Here I find myself at 19 to 16. That's a difference of 3. So the attacking player gets 3 victory points. Granted, that's not much, but you can do the complete opposite if you attack at the right time in the right place, if there isn't a lot of armor, if you've modulated the energy well, that sort of thing. That's how combat and damage work. So yes, there's that little bit of damage that changes the value a little bit, but there's the big management part before that. In the end, we want reflection and strategy to take precedence over randomness. Another thing you can do, you can shoot the walls of the arena. If you put 15 points of damage, you destroy the wall. If you don't put 15 points of damage, you don't destroy the wall. However, the wall will remain intact. You'll have to deal 15 points at once. Then, when the player's turn is over, he's done his 5 actions or even less, depending on the things he's done. We move on to the next player, who takes his actions, the next player does his actions, and so on. When everyone has completed their actions, we move on to the next round. There are also prestige points. These are bonus victory points. First, if you kill an opponent's artifact. In that case, you get 5 bonus victory points, on top of the victory points for the damage you've just done to it. Now that's cunning. Another thing, if at the end of the game you're still alive, you'll share victory points. If there are any surviving artifacts, they'll get 10 extra victory points for each artifact that died during the game. So if there are 3 surviving artifacts, 10 points for each, 20 points for each if there are 2 left, and 30 points for the last surviving artifact for 3 dead players, so 3 times 10. One last thing about victory points, you can also lose victory points, because if we end our turn in the periphery of the arena, in other words outside the arena, in that case, you lose 5 victory points, because you're a coward. And so when we've calculated all these victory points, we look on the track that has the most victory points and we found the winner. Now you know how to play Artifacts, and don't forget to register on the Artifacts game page, because even if you hear about it on YouTube, maybe you'll hear more about it in our newsletters. And who knows, maybe a pre-order soon. But now you can play Artifacts on Tabletop Simulator. You'll find the link in the description. I invite you to like this video and subscribe to receive future releases of Artifacts and to find out when the game will be released, because I want you to experience this adventure with me. See you next time. Until then, I say, see you!